الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. Welcome everybody to our webinar tonight. And let me just start the screen share so you can start seeing the screen. It's called Walk a Mile in My Shoes, Supporting Children and Families with Special Needs. Quite often we see people around us who might look different, who might act different, children, families, and we don't know what to do. I myself have often found myself to be confused. You know, how do I interact? You know, is it appropriate to ask a question? Will people get upset with me if I ask this question? Or what is considered rude? How can I be supportive? Am I making assumptions here? Am I judging people? A whole series of questions come up about who exactly is this person, their family, their circumstances, what do I do, what do I not do, and yet these are our community members. And so with that in mind, we organized this webinar in coordination with Muhsen, which is Muslims Understanding and Helping Special Education Needs, organization that was formed, I believe, about 2 years ago, that is focused very much on special education needs within the Muslim community. So today we have two speakers who will speak on this topic. On behalf of Muhsen, we have Uzma Manzoor. Uzma is a board-certified behavior analyst and a certified brain injury specialist. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and a Master's of Arts in Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA as the term will be used today. She has been in the field of applied behavior analysis for the past 4 years. She has worked in numerous environments, including special education school district, in-home ABA therapy, adult and youth residential centers, and rehab center for brain injuries. She currently works in a pediatric therapy clinic located in Carrollton, Texas. The program supervisor and manages a caseload of about 10 to 15 patients with multiple diagnoses, mainly autism. Her job entails extensive parent training, and therefore she's very familiar with the type of information parents would need when communicating with school districts as well. She's also quite familiar with IEPs, Individualized Education Plans, and how they're written. Uzma consults and helps with Muhsen. We'll also have a second speaker, Samir Ahmed from the FYI. I'll introduce her when we get to her. But before I pass the mic over to Uzma, I just wanted to mention to everybody, I got ahead of myself there a little bit in introducing Uzma, but if you wish to join the conversation, please tweet us at the FYI_org, at the FYI_org as you see on the screen, hashtag the FYI webinar. You can ask us questions that way. You can also join us on Facebook, like our page and ask questions there, or you can just write questions on the wall while you're looking at the presentation there. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Uzma to begin, inshallah. Uzma, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm going to quickly just share my screen here so I can have my piece of the PowerPoint up. Okay. All right, so I am going to get started. First of all, I would like to really thank FII for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Alhamdulillah, it's a great pleasure of mine to be able to participate in an event like this, which is really working towards a field that I am very passionate about. And Alhamdulillah, have been blessed to work with these families for 4 to 5 years now, as Nadeem mentioned. So today's topic starts out with, walking a mile in my shoes. We are, like Nadeem mentioned, we are talking about discussing families that have children or loved ones with special needs. And a big part of that is the area to discuss, I think, is the behavior management piece, and that is the area that I can bring the expertise in. I think behavior management, it impacts everybody's daily life a whole lot. And, it is one thing to say that, yes, it must be so difficult for these families, but to live and walk a mile, like it says, in their shoes, to live a day in their life, in these families' lives, it is a challenge. It is a challenge that has been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to these families. And there's lots of pros to it, but obviously there's a lot of need in terms of how to learn to better understand what they need and what their needs are in the community. So I'm going to discuss a little bit of behavior management side on that, and then going into a little bit what these families, what you as a parent, as a sibling, what you can do to help advocate for your loved one. I had a little bit on my background here, but Nadeem already did a wonderful job introducing me, alhamdulillah. So to start out with, obviously I have to talk about applied behavior analysis because that is my area of expertise. I can't say much without talking about my field specifically, and I'm not going to go too much in detail with it. Some people are very much familiar with it as their children, especially in the area of autism and other developmental disorders, typically have experience with this form of therapy. But for those who have never heard of it, I definitely feel obligated to give a short background to this. So applied behavior analysis, it is a science, and obviously there's that fancy definition that comes from our textbooks to you guys. But basically, it is a way to look at a person's environment and determining what aspect or what part of this person's environment is either increasing, decreasing, or maintaining certain behaviors. And we'll talk a little bit about what I mean when I talk about behavior and what are different types of behaviors and what we are looking at. But essentially, applied behavior analysis, as it says in the topic, it really goes into analyzing what is happening all around the behavior. We look at a lot of different ways. We look at, in terms of, there's fancy terms, obviously, what happens before the behavior, after the behavior, in terms of the events. So a person's environment can be a person's parents, their spouse, their children, everybody around us is an environment to us. Where we live, what we eat, the things we like to do, those are all environments, and essentially those all have impact on our behavior. One of my favorite quotes that actually by one of the founding fathers of ABA, B.F. Skinner, emphasizes that the learner is always right. So what that means is having the mentality to take away the blame from the person who is experiencing whatever issue it is, and really trying to see what it is we can do to manage, manipulate, or change the environment so that behavior changes. Sometimes in the area of special needs, we see the mentality that, someone is lazy, someone doesn't want to do something, or someone is a brat. These are a lot of the terms we hear from essentially a lot of people who are demonstrating a lot of ignorance, unfortunately. But the idea behind applied behavior analysis is to ensure that that blame is not placed on the person, and that change has to be under our control. And what can we do as the people around this person to bring about that change? Applied behavior analysis, what makes it a little bit unique in this day and age is that it is evidence-based therapy. What that means is that every procedure, every principle that we work with, it's based on research, and there is clinical evidence that is present to that. There are definitely a lot of different types of therapies out there that you can choose for your child or your loved one. But evidence-based means that there is going to be some science behind it. There's going to be replication of studies behind it. There's going to be data behind it. Obviously, when we seek some kind of medical treatment, if you're going to walk into a hospital and it turns out that we need some kind of procedure done, our hope is to have a procedure conducted on us that has been conducted before, that has shown significant results for improvement to help me with whatever ailment it is that I am experiencing. So ABA is an evidence-based therapy, which can really give you that peace of mind. Okay, this is something that has been done multiple times. It has significant proof available that I can personally find out in form of research articles and journal articles that shows the improvement and the impact of this therapy. So it's not subjective, the term that I would like to use, and you will hear me further on in the presentation as well. the term is being objective. And so it's not just my opinion or the person next to me, their opinion. It is, showing progress based on data. And therefore, as it has been recognized by CDC and the Surgeon General, and currently applied behavior analysis is covered by most insurance companies. It depends on what state you are. We are still not there yet, working on, this field is still growing, working on that. However, the reason why it has been recognized and insurance companies are able to cover for this form of therapy and pay for this, for the most part, is because it is an evidence-based therapy. So that is a little bit on what applied behavior analysis just in a gist is. I really thought about, what in the short amount of time that I have, what is the most important aspect of ABA that I can share with parents or with families that really, puts it out there, and other than being that it's evidence-based. But in general, if I take my child to a therapy center or any form, whether it's physical therapy, occupational therapy, wherever it is that I take my child, I would like to know, is my child having fun? Is my child happy going over there? Is my loved one being cared for while I am entrusting a caregiver with this really, really special piece of my heart? Is that person going to like it over there? So the biggest thing that we use in applied behavior analysis, it's called reinforcement. And I like to call it the power of reinforcement because it does wonderful things for everybody who's going through ABA therapy. A reinforcement is essentially a reward system. What it is, it's a, a lot of people will talk about it as, or think of it as, oh, so you are talking about rewarding for behaviors, and sometimes it seems a little exaggerated. Then why do I need to reward people for things that they're supposed to do? Do I need to reward my child for waking up in the morning and making their bed? Isn't that their responsibility? Why are we supposed to reward them? So kind of putting things in perspective, I wanted to take some daily examples and put those out in front of you. Reinforcement systems are very much natural to our being, to our daily existence. It's used all over the world, all around us, all the time. And some of big examples of reward systems in our daily lives is getting a paycheck. I like to ask people, when was the last time you went to work without getting a paycheck? Alhamdulillah, I love my job, I really do. But obviously a paycheck is a reward at the end of, spending countless hours away from family, putting in all this effort. So there is a reward at the end. Other simple examples are getting verbal appreciation from our loved ones and strangers. When you're at work and your boss tells you, hey, that was an awesome job, you did that report, that was fantastic. It makes your day just hearing that simple praise. And in the future, you are more likely to engage in those good behaviors because you're receiving some kind of reinforcement for that. Winning an award. So you work very hard and you compete and you end up, winning, you get an award. That's going to keep you going. If you spend years of your life, working towards a goal and you never end up, getting some reinforcement out of that, the likelihood of that behavior continuing is very less. So that's what reinforcement is about, and I think I would say, without a doubt, 90% of ABA therapy really revolves around the system. Every principle, every procedure that we implement in our programs revolves around reinforcement. And like I mentioned before, it makes therapy and learning enjoyable. And when something is enjoyable to me, I'm going to engage in those skills that I learn out of that for a very long time. So there's a lot of retention of skills, and that is the big idea behind it. I don't want to teach you something that you're going to know just for today, and then tomorrow you forget it. The idea is to retain it for a long period of time. And the last concept that I want to put on to reinforcement here is, the idea is to create a love for learning. So a learner is always open to acquiring new skills. It's not just about learning to tie my shoes. It's not just about, like I said, learning to make your bed. It's not just about learning to cook. The idea is that I should love learning. So whenever there's a new skill presented in front of me, I'm open to it and I'm very excited about learning. This can apply to academic skills as well. So I just wanted to highlight that about ABA. There definitely utilizes the power of reinforcement there. The two types of things, or in terms of what we say, what is behavior? And I think this is very important to understand for people, even if you don't have someone in your family or in your immediate surroundings, someone who has special needs. I think this slide really starts to highlight and talk about what are the two main aspects that someone who might be going through ABA therapy or someone who has special needs might be looking at in terms of behavior perspective. Now, one thing to remember, as I said early on in my presentation, behavior management is an important piece, because when I go outside, when I try to integrate into the community, or when I go to work, when I go to school, what other people can see about me or judge me through, it's my behavior. Behavior is happening all the time. We are engaging in behavior all the time. Breathing is behavior, eating is behavior, bathing is behavior. Everything a living person is doing essentially is behavior. So these families or these individuals, with special needs, they're going to be experiencing some issues with behavior. And so there's two types of things we look at in ABA. We look at behavior reduction and we look at skill acquisition. When we look at behavior reduction, we're talking about maladaptive or problem behaviors. And of course, this is what everyone is very much interested in, because disruptive or problematic behaviors, they will significantly impede the daily life or functioning level of an individual, or just even the entire family. So I wanted to give some examples of these behaviors, and these are a little bit extreme, and sometimes they don't have to be this exaggerated, but hitting others, screaming, spitting, hitting yourself, all of these are examples of maladaptive behaviors. And one thing that is really important to understand, these families who have these individuals close to them, who are caring for these people, things like going to the movies, going to a wedding, just going to simple prayers at the mosque or community events, these can be very, very difficult. And so when we start this topic of, what needs to be told to people to spread awareness about people with special needs, it's really important to understand that the daily, everyday things that I might be doing, these families, these people, they are being restricted from certain environments because of these maladaptive behaviors. So ABA really looks at behavior reduction as one part, but I will not say that that is an entire part of it. We also look at skill acquisition. As a behavior analyst, I advocate fully, because you cannot really reduce problem behaviors without teaching good behaviors. So skill acquisition, you can think of it as teaching good behaviors, appropriate behaviors. And now they don't have to be something on top of the world. I mean, they can be very small things that, again, people with special needs might be, challenged in. And so social skills, communication, following instructions, dressing, bathing, grooming, these are all things that people with special needs might need help with learning. And again, regardless of whether your child or your loved one engages in problem behaviors or not, this is something that you have to teach, your loved one. They're not going to be little forever. They're going to grow up, and they're going to need to know how to do these things. And it can be very difficult to teach just these everyday things, depending on what the diagnosis is of your loved one. It can be very difficult to teach some of these very, very minor skills. A typically developing 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old can learn these in a heartbeat, whereas a child with autism, by the age of 4 to 6 years, we're still not seeing some of the basic skills. And so, if these needs are not addressed, children and families will typically feel isolated from a lot of environments that actually should be enrichment for children. So, things like going to the park and, all the community events that I talked about earlier in the behavior reduction part, I am now becoming restricted because my child does not know how to go and make friends with other kids. My child just goes and sits in the corner and again, feeling isolated. So that's creating a lot of restrictions on your daily life. I wanted to kind of, as we are talking about the restrictions in your daily life, I wanted to just quickly, wrap up my part here by talking about what are the different ways to help your child with special needs. As a parent, as a sibling, as an extended family, there's a lot out there that you can do. Alhamdulillah, there are a lot of resources out there, definitely. But some things you really have to, on a personal level, that I find myself telling families over and over, and I think I have a little list here that I like to share. The number one thing is educate yourself about any form of therapy you're considering for your child. I'm not only going to sit here and advocate for ABA therapy. I think there are a lot of therapies out there depending on the need of your loved one or your family member. I think you can make use of. But understand that, like I said earlier, a research or science-based foundation for therapeutic procedures is going to be critical. So it's not just someone saying, oh, I think your child is doing better. I think they're better because they look happy. No, there needs to be data to support that. I'm going to track how many skills they learned in a certain amount of time. I need to know that. I need to see that. So please, there's a lot of resources out there. Educate yourself about those therapies. Collaborate with your child's educational placement. So a lot of times, when you have young children who are going to these special education districts, it's very hard to know what is going on the other side. When I drop my child off at school, what is happening over there the entire day? So, gain an understanding of your child's individualized educational plan. If you don't understand what's written in that plan, make sure you advocate. You advocate that you need to understand each and every goal of what's going on. You need to understand how progress is being tracked on those IEPs. And understand what a behavior intervention plan is. So typically a BIP would be part of that IEP, which will talk about behavior management. Understand, make sure that you're advocating for your child so you are able to understand and implement a lot of that in your daily life at home as well. And one thing I tell parents, advocate, yes, be the voice that needs to be heard, but you need to cooperate with your educators and therapists as well. It's not always going to be that they are not doing their job right. So have an open mind to that. Try your best to work with them as a team. Pick your battles wisely. I think a lot of times we get stuck so much on my child's academic needs, and that needs to be met. We forget that adaptive skills are equally important. And like I mentioned earlier, your little one's not going to be little forever. And I know it's a question that all parents with children with special needs have asked themselves at one point. It's not a foreign question to you. But think about it seriously. Think about what is a short-term goal, what is a long-term goal for your child. Maybe working on those academics currently is not the best time because my child needs to be potty trained. So really, work on when the needs need to be addressed or what your, picture is for your child's progress. And the last part is advocating, I'm sorry about that, advocating for inclusion in your community. So really thinking about, okay, my environment is restricted in these certain ways. Like I said, going to a park, going to a mosque, going to weddings, different places. Why am I not being able to take my child? We really have to start working on making this community, our environment inclusive for our children today. So inshallah, in the future, when they're adults, they don't have to fight as much. So really, really start thinking about inclusion in your community. And I think that will be a good segue for Nadeem for you to introduce Sameera, as I know she has some amazing ideas and resources to talk about from here.
Yes, thank you, Uzma, for that great presentation. Some great information coming our way there. Oops, I think you're still seeing Uzma's screen, and hopefully you're seeing me right now. But that's all right. So our next speaker is Dr. Sameera Ahmed. She is the director of the Family and Youth Institute. She holds a PhD in clinical psychology, a master's in biology, as well as a certificate in family life education. She currently serves as an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at Wayne State University. She also serves as an associate editor for the Journal of Muslim Mental Health. She's also a licensed psychologist in the states of Michigan and Ohio. She conducts a lot of research with the FYI. Her areas of research span a number of topics, include Muslim youth and Muslim mental health. And she also teaches a number of workshops for the FYI across the country on multiple topics. With that, I will introduce Dr. Samir Ahmed. Go ahead, Samir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Uzma, in terms of your introduction to the topic. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit more about those of us who don't have family members who have special needs. And I think just as someone who doesn't have any relatives or children who have special needs, one of the things that oftentimes we are oblivious to what's going on and the challenges and how to be supportive for families. And one of these aha moments for me was when I was in college. I had a very good friend. We used to organize activities together, attend events all over town. We were in the same halaqah. You know, she was, mashallah, very strong and inspirational leader and a sister. And we were very close. And one day, you know, we were just hanging out, and she seemed really frustrated. So I asked her, you know, what's going on? And, you know, as we were talking, she was telling me about how she's really worried and frustrated for her sister. While my friend was active in the community and all over the place, had a great social network, really spiritually developing, connected within the community, her sister, on the other hand, was hearing impaired. She had increasingly over time become isolated, didn't have as many friends, stopped attending community events, and it was beginning to impact her iman. And as we discussed, I was really curious, you know, what's the difference? What's going on? And my friend started telling me about how it was really hard for her sister now to go to the masjid as she became older. It was really uncomfortable because oftentimes community members were often disrespectful. Either they were staring her down when she would use American Sign Language to communicate, or that they were insensitive and didn't understand why she couldn't respond to them when they spoke to her. Or even basic things such as when the imam would make the announcements, or the khatib would give Jummah khutbah, she couldn't understand any of it. You know, she was able to lip read, but she couldn't lip read the khatib's lips from the women's section that was so far away. So what would happen is, initially when she was younger, she would come to the masjid and she'd sit and follow what everybody was saying, but it would seem like eternity because she didn't know what was going on. She couldn't see, she couldn't listen, she couldn't really feel engaged. And I think what happened is slowly, increasingly, she started not going to the masjid as much. She didn't have that community sense. And it's each interaction and experience made her realize that she didn't belong. And it was emotionally and physically draining for my friend's sister, so she stopped going to the masjid. It wasn't that she didn't want to go. She wanted to go. Her heart was there, but there was no place for her. And I think for me, as I heard that story, it really hit me. You know, here's this young woman who wants desperately to be part of the community, and yet we're the ones who are pushing people away because of our collective ignorance, and I include myself in that. We're just not aware of their existence and their needs. We're not able to provide those lack of programming. And it reminded me, as I was thinking that day, it reminded me of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gently corrected our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his interaction with his companion Ibn Maktoum, which is highlighted in Surah Abasa, right? And as I was listening to her, it made me realize that addressing the needs of families with disabilities is not the responsibility of the family itself. It's a collective communal responsibility. Each one of us has a responsibility. While the parents and siblings of individuals with special needs are taking care of, their day-to-day needs, who's really helping meet the social, emotional, spiritual, and educational needs of the individual? Who's supporting their families? And so part of what I would like to talk about today is for us to realize that this is truly a communal responsibility. And we need to take on the collective responsibility, each person doing their part. One person may be, helping out with support. Another person may be thinking about programming. We have to figure out what is our role and how are we going to be part of this process. So before we actually talk about it, I want to start talking a little bit about the research. What do we know about individuals with special needs? Well, when we look around in our community, we often don't see too many individuals with disabilities, and so we mistakenly assume they don't exist. Just like myself, I didn't realize my friend had a sister who had special needs. I didn't see her at the masjid, but from the story, we do realize that many people are there, but they don't feel like they're accepted by our community, and that needs to change. When we look at the research on American Muslims with disability, we find that it's limited. I mean, last year there was one of the first studies that came out and really looked at the number of Arab Americans with disabilities. Now, this is Arab Americans, doesn't include all Muslims. Part of the population may be Christian. We don't know all the details, but this is our first set of numbers that we have. And when we look at that, we know that at least 336,600 Arab Americans have disabilities. Of that, about 23,000 are individuals who are children. So really, 23,400 school-age children. That's in America. Something similar could be looking at, if you look at the research in the UK, is we know that there are 500,000 adult Muslims in the UK who have disabilities, and that's actually the largest religious group who are of individuals claiming disability benefits, right? So that's just the adults. What about the children? And so what we find from these numbers is, one, there's a large number of people out there. We just don't see them at the masjid. And we need to do something about that, and we need to make that change. And so part of it is, one, we definitely need more research. And part of doing more research is understanding who's out there and what are their needs. And right now, Muhsen has a campaign going on called Muhsen Map. So please look over there and share that information if you can. Share info at Muhsen Map. But one of the things one of the main goals I really have for today is for us to really think about, we need to start becoming agents of change. You have this huge population who needs support, who needs to be included, and yet we haven't done anything about it. And so what I ask for you and remind you of the verse from the Quran, إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Verily, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. We're not going to have more inclusive masajids or families until we start taking action. We have to make that change. And again, the change starts with us taking action. The idea of the Muhsen Map is for us to realize is there may be individuals in our community, in our social network, that we may not be aware of. But if we share the information about Muhsen Map, maybe they'll see it and they'll identify and connect with Muhsen and let them know, hey, we exist, here are our needs, this is where we live, so that Muhsen can then go ahead and start better able to meet their needs. Similarly, please try to encourage your friends and family to do the same as well. And so really, I can't underestimate the need and importance for research to take place in our community. Now, as we talk about being agents of change, I want to move on to the next slide and really help us understand, okay, what do we need to do? as individuals who are committed towards inclusion, we need to really begin by reflecting internally. We need to start by beginning to address our internal biases. What are they? What are our assumptions and beliefs about individuals with disability? Do we believe individuals are dumb? Do we believe that they're not able to contribute to the community? Do we just see their caregivers as being overwhelmed and a test from Allah? Like, what are we thinking? And really, really reflect on these biases, because what we find is our biases impact how we feel and think, which impacts our nonverbal communication, right? And unfortunately, people pick up on them. And we know from the research that our biases and perceptions have lasting impact on individuals and families with disabilities. Right? So we need to really begin by, one, identifying and understanding our biases, and then really educate ourselves. Muhsen has a wonderful video gallery with a number of different speakers talking on different topics that is really helpful in helping our process and of our development and education. There's also another website, islamicworkplace.com, that has a number of different videos by individuals with different disabilities talking about their needs and their issues and challenges that they face trying to integrate into the community, and really, kind of understand things from their perspective. And this can help you better develop your awareness and increase your sensitivity to the very needs of individuals and families with disabilities. So in addition, once you identify your biases, and that's something that you have to kind of really think about, the next thing we really want to do is look at our language, right? We need to shift in how we think about inclusion, and realize that how we think about it, it also impacts our language choice. It's really important for us to put the person before his or her disability. They are an individual, right? The Canadian Association for Muslims with Disability has a really nice kind of a layout description of what are the things that you say or don't say. What are the things? What are the language choices that you can make in order to be more inclusive? So you would want to say you would describe a person with a disability, not the disabled, right? You want to honor the other person. You want to honor other aspects of who they are and try to know them beyond their disability. And the same with their family. You wouldn't refer to their family as, oh, that family is the disabled family. No, this is a family who is supporting an individual with disability, right? So part of it is realizing the language choices that we make. And then third is really, as we now talk in a more inclusive fashion, to really focus on behavior change. We need to have a paradigm shift in how we conceptualize special needs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has changed the narrative, and when he corrected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he changed the narrative, and we must learn from that. And Sheikh Omar Suleiman has a number of videos talking about that, and I think it's really helpful for us to really think about, well, what does it mean, and how are we going to change our behavior? Realize that each disability is different. But what's interesting is that when we look at the seerah or the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he makes an effort to include companions with disabilities with real meaningful responsibilities given their abilities that they can. Now, so when we think about that example, we really want to focus on abilities. So like the Prophet ﷺ had sent Abdullah ibn Maktoum along with Mus'ab ibn Umair to teach the people of Medina. Yes, he was blind, but that didn't impact his cognitive abilities. He was an excellent teacher. Yes, he was visually impaired, but that didn't impact his ability to think and teach. So again, we have to be allies and help support individuals and their families. We need to recognize that individuals with disabilities, especially intellectual, are no less human than you or I. So we need to try to connect with them at the individual and human level. We need to try to get to know their personality, their interests, their desires, and strengths. and really have fun with them, laugh with them, get to see the real them, right? And so realize that that's really what they want. Many people just want that human connection. And it's really important for that individual, but also to really think about, in a creative fashion, how can you be supportive for their families? Oftentimes, with families, they may be trying to do many different things, may have little support. Depending on the type of needs of the individual, the caregiver may have challenges meeting the social, spiritual, extracurricular activities of the other kids in the house or their own needs. Really take a village approach. Lend a hand, but do so in a manner that's respectful for the individual and their family. Don't, barge in and, be the savior type. Ask them, how can you help? Give them suggestions. Would this be helpful? Maybe another child could use a ride someplace, and that extra 10 minutes of not having to tow one place to another would just be helpful in kind of recovering from the day. Maybe it's, they just want to visit. Maybe, just having a nice meal sent to the house is helpful. Really ask, and, be open to their suggestions. So really think about what are these things that you can do at the individual level. Now, when beyond the individual level, then we also want to talk about the masajids, right? So you as an individual can, it's really important for us, each individual, make a difference, but at the same time, we need to be change agents, and we start with our home, and we start with ourselves and our families, but then we really need to make the masajids more inclusive. And like I said earlier, giving the example of the story of my friend's sister, she wanted to be at the masjid, but the masjid was simply not inclusive. So, in order to try to make the masjid more inclusive, we really need to begin with the needs assessment and do an accessibility audit. We need to begin by taking a look around us to see if there are any physical barriers that may prevent someone from coming to the masjid by doing an accessibility audit. Do we have accessible ramps and elevators? Are they hidden in dark spaces and areas, which for an already vulnerable population, that's not exactly safe. So are we, yes, we may have a ramp and elevator, but is it a safe location, right? Do we have enough parking spots for people needing handicapped spaces? I've seen often people who have searched for spots, they go around the parking lot, and then they have to go home because there's not enough handicapped spots. Or someone chose to ignore the sign and park there because they were late and they couldn't find a parking spot. And so now an individual who really needs a parking spot is left to try to figure out what to do. And really, really think about what we're doing. Are there obstacles to safety? Oftentimes you go to the masjid, especially in Ramadan, right outside of the musalla, the prayer area, shoes everywhere in the entranceway. Think about those with wheelchairs. Think about those with walking aids, somebody who may be visually impaired. What are they going to do? Are you putting someone's life at risk because you didn't want to take the 2 extra steps to put your shoes away on the shelf? Really think about what you're doing and encourage those around you to really follow the rules. They're for other people's safety. By you not willing to take your shoes and put them away, you're endangering somebody else. So, really think about that. That's part of the audit. It may be hard to maneuver around the areas due to confined tight spaces or segregation. Really try to help make space so the individual feels included and comfortable to go from one place to another. You may have to make structural changes. Some of it, structural changes in terms of the elevators and ramps, but some of it is also behavior change at the community level. We really need to think about our akhlaq or our manners and how we think and are considerate about other people. Muhsen is willing to help massages to do this needs assessment. So really, please contact Muhsen, Juhi Tahir about this, and really find out what can you do. The first step is just getting a simple assessment. And I think later on, Uzma is going to talk a little bit about some of this, what could be done. So, but again, one, so we need to really do needs assessment. Two, at the massages, we need to have awareness campaigns. This is probably one of the easiest things that any community can do, to really implement an awareness campaign. Encourage khatibs to have khutbahs on this topic. Majority of the organizations working with individuals with some form of disabilities have khutbahs or talking points that khatibs can use to implement. So, they're already done. All you have to do is repeat it. Use these opportunities. In khutbahs, you have the largest group of individuals there listening. They're required to come. So really use that opportunity. Educate the congregation on different types of disabilities, intellectual, physical, emotional. Really help them understand. Many people, you can go look at, highlight that prophetic examples, the legacy of inclusion, the different sahabis, different great leaders who had disabilities, and really help people understand and personify individuals, and help them realize that so much of our intellectual growth of our community happened due to the involvement and inclusion of individuals with some form of disability. I mean, these khutbahs and lectures and workshops can really help people become aware of their biases, and it impacts individuals, families, especially with disabilities. Imagine, like, you've just heard a khutbah. There's a couple people in the community who have special needs, and so now you have this huge community who's willing to support and figure out, oh, okay, now what can I do to help you out? How can I support? Really creating a different culture within the community is extremely important. Use these opportunities to teach people, about misconceptions. One of the things, some of the information that I'm sharing with you is from a report which was done by the Canadian Association of Muslims with Disabilities, and what they kept saying is, oftentimes people would say that, we have a wheelchair, but we're being prevented from being able to pray in the carpeted areas due to concerns over najasa or impurities. These are issues that individuals with disabilities struggle with constantly and have to fight and address, and realize, this stuff gets hard. Once, twice, it's fine, but then afterwards, you get tired of it. So, really, these are the opportunities that you can share that information. Also, at the Family and Youth Institute, we do have articles that we do send out on different topics. One of those topics are on special needs and understanding, as well as additional topics on how to strengthen communication in families. So those are two ideas that we could use in terms of greater conclusion in the massages. And next, a couple other things that I wanted to share before we end is really think about, how can we be more inclusive in our programming? If you think about, if you have a lecture in Urdu or Arabic, we often have translators to help people who are not familiar with the language. What about individuals who are hearing impaired and communicate in a different language? We really need to be able to have khutbahs, lectures in American Sign Language, or maybe have closed captioning. We really need to start taking programming steps to make the massages more inclusive. Set up masjid subcommittees to help maintain interest and focus on issues and needs, raise awareness of needs of individuals with individuals and their families. Make sure events are inclusive. Make sure that there's safe spaces, for individuals, who may have challenges in large environments, lots of noise. How can we make spaces inclusive and supportive for individuals who may want to come to the masjid? Really think about, can we have sensory-friendly rooms or programs for autistic individuals? We need to think institutionally, what are we going to do to meet the needs of these individuals? In some cases, it may be offering programs to help individuals with certain disabilities. Other times, it may be so that their families can enjoy an event with the rest of the community. Maybe having a peer support or some individual to help out. A community member can volunteer to look after an individual, either a child or an elder. Really think about what can you do in terms of being more supportive. one point I forgot to add about in terms of the inclusive programming is, if you think about it, oftentimes in the masajids, if you want to read Quran, they're the normal Qurans that everybody reads, but what if you're visually impaired? What if you have difficulty seeing small font? What do we have? I know global deaf Muslims are trying to translate the Quran into American Sign Language. They need financial support to make it happen. That's another way we can show our support, one, by what we do in terms of our actions within the masjid, but also supporting other organizations who are trying to do good work. So really, really think about more inclusive programming, building a more supportive masjid culture. And so as we go on, one of the things that Uzma is going to talk about in a few minutes is this new program that Muhsen has about really how can you make the masjid, your masjid, more friendly. But before we do that, I wanted to share one other slide, and that is kind of really thinking about what are the organizational resources. Now, my focus was really how can we be allies? And so the Family and Youth Institute, we do have a number of resources available for different organizations, for individuals who want to be more supportive, and different articles, so you can get a perspective on what are things that we can do as an individual. But at the same time, there are a number of different organizations out there. There's still a lot of work needs to be done, but I wanted to give this as a resource for you to see what's out there. Again, many different organizations doing great things. So really reach out, see what they're doing, and see how you can be part of that change. How can you be supportive? So with that, what I want to do is turn it back to Uzma to talk a little bit about the Masjid certification program.
Jazakallah khair, Sameera. That was really a great piece, I want to say, that you presented there, in really being a voice to a lot of these families and bringing up a discussion that really needed to happen. So I'm really glad to hear that information. I just want to, I'm going to pull up my slide again. So as Sameera started talking about the Muhsen, she started talking about the different masajid and what are the different ways masajids can be inclusive for these families and for these individuals. Muhsen, being a nonprofit organization, their number one mission statement is to really advocate and spread awareness and bring about the learning and the change in our communities about special needs in our Muslim communities. Like Sameera pointed out a little bit, unfortunately, there are a lot of taboos, a lot of biases, right? So starting with that and then working towards what are the practical ways to help your masjid or to make your masjid more inclusive. Muhsen currently offers a certification program, and if you are interested in this, at the end of this, please feel free to contact Muhsen. The email information is on there, and the website Sameera also shared with you guys. And Juhi Tahir will be glad to share much more information with you guys. But just in the gist, there are different types of certifications that your masjid can get. And in order to start a conversation with your masjid, I must say, a lot of times, like Sameera said, there's not a lot of research out there. So not a lot of imams and masjid administrations understand that there is a large need within their immediate community for this. So Muhsen can actually provide you with a survey that they already have created, that if the administration of the masjid or the imams want to find out, okay, what exactly is the need, Muhsen can provide you with a survey like that. So if you start becoming the voice to your masjid, I'm sure the administrations will be more susceptible to getting that discussion going, and to finding out what exactly the need is in your community. And based on your need, there's these different certification programs that Muhsen can come in and help you establish those resources, from making sure that at the community, the masjid events that are occurring, is there a person in charge of childcare who is experienced in special needs, to having a sign language interpreter, to having, when we get into platinum, obviously certification, a lot, there's more required, in terms of having a playground that's accessible to children with special needs. So there's different aspects to this program. Mashallah, I want to say this is a wonderful initiative, and as being in this field and working in this field, there's really not that much out there. And being a Muslim, it makes me very proud to be working with an organization like Muhsen and that they're promoting this message. So get that conversation going with your masajid. Like Sameera said, if you have the need, be the voice and get that communication going. And again, if you have any more questions about this, please feel free to contact Muhsen for further information. Okay, so Nadeem, I'm going to give this back to you.
All right, so as we proceed, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, you can tweet us at the FYI_org, hashtag the FYI webinar. You can go on our Facebook page and ask there, or you can just ask questions on the wall itself, whether using Hangout or Google+, either way. So we'll just, while we're waiting, give a couple of minutes, maybe some questions come in. And okay, here's a question. Actually, while we're waiting for questions, let me do a quick little intro about the FYI, since folks may not all be aware of the FYI. So the FYI is a nonprofit research and education organization. It has two elements to it, two key elements. One is research, to really understand the issue at a deeper level. Uzma really hit on it when she said, why does she use ABA? Because it's not something that somebody just on their own personal experience did it, but it's been well researched, it's been well understood. Well, we want to expand that type of thinking to everything that we do with respect to mental health issues. It's not just one person's experience. So what can we do to really research and understand the problem, whether it's a problem of drugs or disabilities, whatever it is? Once we have understood all of that research is only so good if communities can actually use it. So we want to educate the individuals and families on those issues and the causes and the solutions. Doing that hopefully will empower communities to bring about change. Things like the Muhsen campaign, the certification campaign, other things, all of these things will empower the communities to bring about positive change that will result in the development of our communities. So that's what FYI does. How does it do it? It does it through different ways. You've got infographics that summarize research findings. We've got videos that talk about research issues themselves, as well as what can community members do. There are detailed reports that we present. We do actually workshops. We come out to communities and present workshops in detail on different topics, and then we have different publications as well. All of this you can access through our website, thefyi.org. If you want to stay in touch with us, you can join our email list by going to our website, and of course you can follow us on Facebook. And with that, here's our first question. Should special needs children be kept separate from other children? Isn't separate better? Who wants to take that on, Uzma or Samira?
I can definitely take that on. In terms of certain aspects of it, and I'm not going to, perceive this questions as, oh, why are we thinking that way? I'm going to think of the both pros and cons of this and be objective about this. In certain aspects, at times in terms of what kind of learning is happening. So there has been times when in the education system, I have actually recommended to parents, don't push your child into mainstream classrooms when they're not ready for it. So don't set them up for failure. However, when it comes to social skills, that's where they're going to learn. And I think bringing in the concept of inclusion, I think, as Sameera pointed out, it really starts out in our homes, right? So really talking to our children, our typically developing children, that what needs to be done, how can we be more accepting of individuals with special needs? And it really has to start from when they're young. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of children that are typically developing, how is it beneficial or negative on them? I think it's beneficial for them because it really will go into building their character. The thing with special needs, God forbid, you never know when something can happen, right? When in their life later on they might experience a challenge like that. So I think in terms of preparing them for the real world and preparing them to be compassionate human beings, I think it's very important for them to understand that. And then for children with special needs, learning those social skills, those modeling from those typically developing peers, it is a great advantage to that. Obviously, you have to keep behavior management in mind, and there might be tiny steps that you take towards that inclusion. So my child who is very physically aggressive towards other children, I might not go and leave that child in a facility with typically developing children for hours on end. I might start with supervision. I might make a step-by-step program for them and consult how they can do that. But the bottom line, I think it is beneficial for both parties to do that.
Very good. Great, thank you for sharing that. Let's put in one more question. I know time's up, but there's another question here. Can special education needs children ever reach their fullest potential?
I will take that one. It is a very individualized question that you're asking. When we talk about fullest potential, I think the number one question that kind of adds on to that is, what is your perception of the fullest potential of this child? And what really is the fullest potential of this child? So for example, obviously if there is a diagnosis there's going to be what we call a ceiling on someone's performance. Biologically, physiologically, that person has a cap, has a ceiling on their performance level and different skills. But my child with autism, okay, they might be on a functioning level where they can't go to a mainstream classroom, and that might not be a goal that is achievable for them. However, they need to be potty trained. They need to know how to dress themselves so that, mom is not waking up every morning and dressing them. Those things might be part of their fullest potential. So yes, absolutely, every child can and should reach their fullest potential. It is us as parents and families that have to understand that, we are hoping for the best and our expectations are really for the best for our child, however, not setting them up for failure.
All right, thank you, Uzma, and we are out of time. This has been a great presentation, and I really want to thank both of the speakers, both Uzma and Sameera, for their time and sharing their thoughts with us. I'm reminded of Imam Ghazali's treatise that he wrote within the Ihya called The Duties of Brotherhood in Islam. And after hearing what has been said, and that there's a large number of Muslims who need support, some of the numbers that Sameera shared, I asked myself, am I fulfilling the duties of brotherhood of my brothers and sisters in Islam? Am I doing my share? Will I be asked on the Day of Judgment that I took personal responsibility to change my thoughts, my behavior, my actions? Did I move my community to change the way the community behaves, the way my masjid is, the way my organization is, to fulfill the needs and the duties of brotherhood that we have towards our brothers and sisters, Muslims and beyond that, in humanity as well. A lot of great resources were also shared, and I appreciate that very much. A reminder to the audience that we are recording this webinar, and inshallah it will be available on the FYI website under the videos section. So you can, once it's up, probably in a couple of days, please share it with others who may have missed this webinar, and they can benefit from the information shared. And you can use it to view it yourself. If you want to look up the list of resources that was presented or anything that was mentioned, going back to the recording is a great way to do that. With that, again, thank you everybody for attending. Hopefully this was useful and beneficial to each and every one of us, and we'll utilize this knowledge to act on it and benefit our brothers and sisters in Islam and others in humanity. Hopefully we will try to fulfill some of the duties that we have towards our brothers and sisters all around us. جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر